Okay. Show me.
Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Dutch channel for part 3 in our GEPRC AX5 Monster Quad build series thing. Okay, so in the last video in this series I left you with a quadcopter with motors and ESCs. In this part of the series I'll be adding a PDB, power distribution board, a flight controller and a video transmitter or a VTX and a receiver. So after this video the quadcopter should already be flyable. However, I'll do a separate video on all the software setup. So the firmware for the ESCs, how to set that up, and the firmware for the flight controller, how to get that all sorted. So that'll be coming up shortly. And again, in this video we'll be adding a power distribution board, flight controller, VTX and a receiver. Now I'm gonna be cheating a little because this is what I have for a flight controller and a PDB and a VTX. So an all-in-one board. And let me show you that board. I think it's a really nice board and it's actually on sale at Banggood at the moment. And yeah, so PDB, your XC60 will all be connected over here. And these are your ESC pads over here, 2 over there, 2 over there, 2 over there and 2 over there. And over here, that might be a bit hard to see, is your connector for your pigtail. Let me show that to you. Obviously this does come with this flight controller. There you go, a little pigtail, and it has an SMA connector over here for your antenna. So that'll connect over here, and it has a little display for your frequency and channel. There's a little button over here, and probably for frequency and channel and power output. So that's pretty nice. Now I haven't used this board before. It's an F4 board. That's nice, but well, we'll just see how this works out. Now this GEPRC AX5, the Airbus frames do come with a PDB. I won't be using that, obviously. I'll take that out and replace it with this one, the F4 version 5 Pro. And one thing of note about these flight controllers at Banggood, most of the major manufacturers, or most all, that include Betaflight firmware on them, as this one also has, they pay a little fee to Betaflight, Boris, for every product they sell, to keep the development of Betaflight running, right? Boris has to live on something as well, so that's how he gets paid for his development work on the Betaflight releases. With these flight controllers from Banggood, I'm not really sure. I don't think this flight controller is a copy of anything, but still I suspect they don't pay Boris for his development of Betaflight. So what I do every time I order up a flight controller from Banggood, I donate €5 to Boris for his development. And should you do that, well, you be the judge. How would you feel if you'd spend a lot of time on development of software that a lot of people use and then not get paid for it, right? So I think that's fair. Okay, this flight controller comes with a few goodies. Your plastic standoff things, so that's nice. And a bunch of wires, mostly for your receiver. I probably won't even be needing these, but well. Oh, by the way, it's an omnibus flight controller, so it also has a OSD, which is configurable in Betaflight. Okay, so let's see what the first step would be in my installation of this flight controller. As you can see, I've got the props mounted. Now obviously I'll have to take those off again before doing my setup of the flight controller, but I've got those installed to see if I can actually fit a battery and reach that power distribution board without the props hitting the wire. And oh, actually that looks pretty good. Otherwise I might have had to make a little extension. But obviously the idea is that you mount the XC60 connector onto the PDB like this, and the same thing goes for this F4 board. It'll sit like this. So again, I first want to test fit things. Here's where the battery will live, and I can easily reach that XC60 without the props hitting this wire. So next thing I'll do is I'll get the top off of my quadcopter, and then we'll be installing our flight controller. And there you go, we got our PDB, flight controller and VTX mounted in the frame. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and soldered up the XC60 connector. Obviously do make very sure that you have the plus and minus the correct way around. Otherwise your quadcopter will not fly very well. And I've also gone ahead and pre-soldered these tabs at the ends of the flight controller, to which your ESC plus and minuses or grounds will be connected. Now I could go ahead and permanently mount the flight controller now, and on most, or at least many of the flight controllers, you'd have solder tabs at the top of the flight controller for your FPV camera, for your receiver, a buzzer and your LED strip maybe. This flight controller does not have those, and it does have those connectors, but they are actually at the bottom. You see these three white connectors, which the cables that come with the flight controller are for, and those contain all the connectors for your receiver, your buzzer, not unimportant of course, an LED strip and such, and the camera. Now I've gone ahead and looked up a diagram, and that's an important step in any build, to look up the connectors diagram for your board. The board, probably hard to see, but it has small prints to show you what all pins are for, but they are very small, so it's very handy to look up a connectors diagram. Now one thing I've also gone ahead and did is I've mounted vibration isolators. These are not plastic standoffs, but these are Relac rubber vibration isolators, and I've used those on a couple of builds before, and these, for me at least, work out pretty well. And there's a link to those in the description down below as well. So obviously you need to figure out how to connect things. One thing I don't really like about this board is that my receiver will be connected to this connector over here. This connector is suitable for Spectrum satellite receivers, S-Bus and PPM receivers. I'll be using S-Bus, but again, you can use either one of those three. But yeah, the wires of that connector will protrude slightly out of the side of the quadcopter, because this connector is on the side of the flight controller. Maybe you can get around that by using one of the UARTs. So in that case you'd be using this or this connector. That might actually be cleaner, and maybe I'll do that if I can actually figure out how to. But again, if you want to make life a little easier for yourself, you can actually use this connector to hook up your receiver. And yeah, at the bottom, at the top of the flight controller, you've got these plus and grounds for your ESCs, right? And as you see, all ESCs have a plus wire, a ground wire, and this signal wire and an additional ground wire. This ground wire you can solder up to the same ground pads as this one. So these black wires will get soldered to the same tab as these ones. Okay, and what more can I tell you? Well, that's basically it. I'm gonna go ahead and solder things up now. Pretty straightforward, obviously. And then I'll get back to you. But again, you don't want to mount this flight controller, solder up your ESCs, and then find out that I have to get to these connectors. It's handier to, for instance, hook up your camera first and your receiver. And if you have a buzzer, you want to install it at this moment. So I'm gonna be doing that right now, and in a second I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, a little bit of an in-between cut here. I've only connected the receiver by now, as you can see. And yes, I did end up using that connector up at the side. Now, for that to work, you will have to enable UART1 as your serial RX port in the configuration of Betaflight. So that's pretty straightforward. One thing that is very nice about this board is that if you connect it up to your USB, to your computer, your receiver will also be powered. Well, at least mine runs at 5 volts at least. So yeah, that's a nice feature. Not all flight controllers power up the 5 volts rail if you connect them up to your USB port. And actually, let me show you that actually works. USB port. There you go. As you can see, the board lights up. And well, I hope you can see the LED on the receiver. That also lights up. My transmitter isn't on, so it's showing a red LED. But at least it powers up. And that's very convenient because at this point you can then check if your receiver is connected the right way and if the receiver shows up in Betaflight. So yeah, that's definitely a benefit of this board. Not all boards, again, power up the 5 volt rail when you hook them up to your USB port. So, okay. And the next thing we'll do is connect up the FPV camera. I've got a RunCam version 1 here. And let me get back to the diagram again. As you can see, at the front of the board you've got that connector, that multi-connector thing. And it has a camera in port, right? Obviously it doesn't have a camera out or a VTX port because the VTX is embedded in this board. But it also powers your FPV cam with 5 volts. So you'll have to check if your camera can actually run on 5 volts, right? So look up the specs of your FPV camera and see if it actually runs on 5 volts. Now the other option you've got these solder tabs at the bottom. We are looking at the bottom of the board, right? You've got these solder pads, and those are VCC ports, so they have the same current as your battery, so to speak. So you can also hook up your camera to these tabs. These are not the tabs for your ESC, those are at the top, as you can see. Here, 4 tabs for your ESCs. This is just a simple plus and ground. And again, you can use those for anything, but potentially you can use them for your camera, and I probably will. Okay, so that's what I'll do next. So I now have my camera hooked up, the Runcam version 1, and at this point yeah, I can actually try and see if my FPV setup works. Now I did go ahead and solder the power to these tabs. So my FPV camera will be running on the batteries voltage, right? 4S in this case. So let's have a look if this setup actually works. Okay, we hook up a battery. There. And we switch on the monitor. Et voila! I'm not sure how well this will translate into the video, but I'm sure you can actually see I have an FPV feed and I have an OSD as well. So that looks promising. Cool stuff. Always makes me happy to see an FPV feed from a new build for the very first time. So that works. Yeah, it shows me the amperage draw, the voltage, a call sign, flight time, which is of course 0, and my flight mode. So, cool stuff. Alright, let's disattach this again. Okay, so the last two things I need to connect is are the buzzer and my LED strip. Should be pretty straightforward. Okay, well, one thing I should note at this point is that this board does not have a microphone, for as far as I can tell. I don't think it has, and it doesn't have an input for audio either, only a video input, so you won't be hearing what your quadcopter is doing. If that's something you need, this board might not be your best option, so something to keep in mind here. Hotchiki-day, so I've got that done. Here is the back plate of my quadcopter's frame, which has an array of LEDs, as you can see, and it also has a buzzer. So I've got those connected to the flight controller. Now this flight controller actually does come with a buzzer of its own, but obviously I won't be using that because, again, my frame has its own buzzer over here. Now we still have quite a bit of wire mess, and we're going to be solving that by connecting the ESCs, the individual ESCs, to the flight controller. And again, you've got the soldering pads at the ends of the flight controller, and there's a little, actually let me zoom into the flight controller a little. You've got these tiny round solder points for the signal wires of the ESCs, 4 in all, of course. And those, the white wires, the signal wires of your ESCs will be soldered onto. And again, these black wires, the grounds of the signal wires, will be connected to the solder pads for the ESC, so the grounds for the ESCs themselves. And I'm not going to be having you sit through another soldering session. I'll go and solder everything up, and then I'll show you what everything looks like. Hold on. Hotchiki-day, we now have everything connected to the flight controller, and one thing I hadn't noticed before is that this flight controller doesn't have a plus and a ground at every corner. As you can see, it has two pluses on the left. This is the front of the quadcopter. On the left over here, and on the right side we got two grounds, and the other way around at the rear of the quadcopter. So that makes the wiring a little less clean, but well, obviously it works. Now this would also be a good time to bring out your multimeter to see if the connections are correct, if you don't have shorts. And I'll probably do a separate video on actually how to use a multimeter on builds like this and other builds in RC land. Hit me up a comment down below if you'd be interested in that, in a tutorial on how to use a multimeter. And for this one, I can't stress enough to not forget to connect your FPV antenna before you connect up the board. Otherwise you will fry the board. and yeah, that would be a shame, of course. So basically this is all done. Yeah, I have to screw in the FPV camera and screw back the top of our quadcopter, and that's it. And we are now ready to set up the software on our quadcopter, and that means the firmware on the ESCs and the firmware on the flight controller, and that'll be the next video in this build. I'll do a how-to on in any case of a new quadcopter, or maybe you want to update the quadcopter, how to update the firmware on your ESCs, on your flight controller, and how to set things up to get it flying again. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. For now, thank you very much for watching, of course. Hope this video gave you some info on the how and why when building a quadcopter. If you are left with questions, hit me up a comment down below and I'll be happy to answer you. And I hope to see you back in another video. Bye bye.